Hello everybody, welcome to this month's edition of RocGrowth Candids. This month's guest is an entrepreneur here from Rochester, Jason Arena, who is CEO and founder of Workinman. He started this company a number of years ago. He is also a professor at the Rochester Institute of Technology. His games, the games that his company Workinman has created, has been played hundreds of millions of times, and you know, all of you know the companies that his company has worked with. They've worked with companies like Disney, Nickelodeon, Sesame Street, NBC, Nintendo, Sports Illustrated Kids, and many others. And part of why it's so great to have Jason here in particular today is because many of us know that Rochester is a great place to build certain kinds of businesses that have historically been here. Those such as for imaging or optics or healthcare, alternate energy, and all sorts of other ones. But we also have this amazing resource here in the community, largely because of the Rochester Institute of Technology, where we have talented people in the area of gaming and entertainment. And that's what Workinman focuses on, is actually creating those sorts of games and content for the youth market. So thank you very much, Jason, for being here. And maybe start off by telling us a little bit about your company.
Thanks, Alex, and thanks for everybody showing up, and thanks for having me today. So Workinman is a youth-based gaming company. Like Alex said, we make games for the youth market, browser-based and native app games. So if you have children or you yourself have a device, you can download our games from the App Store or Google Play. They can also be played on at Nick.com's website or Disney's website. The company started, there was an opportunity for me. I was working at Nickelodeon in New York City. I was a designer and a developer. I crossed the paths of both being a designer and a developer. And I had this passion to make content, interactive content, youth market content. And what happened was I eventually got tired of working at Nickelodeon, and I came back to Rochester. And a lot of my New York City contacts had reached out to me to make more work. And this was interactive work for websites and games. And eventually, the freelance work turned into more and more people asking me to make more projects for them. So as any entrepreneur would do, there was an opportunity there. And it was that time where I could have said, no, I'm not going to take on any more work, or I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to figure out how to do it. So at that point, that's when I really started to consider making a business out of this. And that's really how it started, Alex, was opportunity arose and I took it.
Well, I know that one of the things that people find fascinating is, what is it, going back even further, that led you to this road? You and I spoke a little bit before this interview, and you talked about the fact that you weren't necessarily a technologist or a computer science person growing up. You were, in fact, kind of the class artist.
Yes.
What led you from art, from that focus, to turning toward technology?
Sure. So a little bit of the history, if I went back to third grade, I can remember I wanted to be an artist or a designer. Actually, I didn't even know what a designer was at that point, but I knew I wanted to do something with visual arts. And eventually, high school, I was always I was a class artist. I was doing graffiti. I was drawing all the time. I was not focusing on math or technology by any means. Quite frankly, in high school, I didn't even know what a computer was. Well, I did not use one. I went to school to be an art teacher in Buffalo, to be an art education person. My senior year of college, I got a hold of a Mac and Photoshop and instantly knew that was my calling. I had to be involved in this technology. Sure, I was doing analog drawing and really embracing that. Probably pretty good at it at the time. But once I got a hold of Photoshop and Illustrator and Adobe products to create content, I just knew that was where I had to be. And after that, I knew the art teaching wasn't for me. I couldn't do that anymore. I wouldn't be authentic or genuine to myself. So I taught myself a good story is my girlfriend at the time told me about this thing called the WWW. It was 1994. I was just graduating undergrad. I was like, oh, the WWW. So I checked it out, World Wide Web, and that's when I really took the first leap into, I taught myself HTML and started a small company here doing freelance work here in Rochester. And things progressed a little bit. I was making websites for people. It was fun. It was really exciting. I mean, it was the wild, wild west of the internet. It was just becoming a commercial project or product. Some life things happened, and I had the opportunity to go to New York City for a graduate degree in New York City at the Pratt Institute for computer graphics and interactive media. And I had already gotten involved in this upswing of technology, and I was super passionate about it, and I would have done it for a living if no one paid me. You know, that's the reality of this. I'd just be doing this stuff, sitting home, not being able to afford anything, living with my parents, maybe. You know, fortunately at that time, I went to New York City on a moment's notice, got into that program, and I ran out of all the money that I had saved up in New York City. So I needed to find a job, and I ended up at Nickelodeon. Again, just fortuitous. Everything kind of worked out for me. But, you know, I always go back to that saying, the harder you work, the luckier you get. I mean, for me and Keith, my business partner here, it just seems to always work that way. We work really hard and all these opportunities show up. So after Nickelodeon, I was an art director and a Flash engineer. So again, I was programming and designing interactive media. And I eventually got bored of New York City life. And when I left Rochester, I never thought I would come back. However, marriage, think about kids, actually going to contract on a co-op in New York City, it's a sobering experience, and Rochester is a very attractive place. And again, I came back and ended up working here at UB, and then RIT came about, and I'm a professor there, and the freelance work started showing up, and I made a company out of it. I think that's a short, condensed story, Alex.
Sure, and it's interesting, a moment ago you mentioned that things just somehow work out. And
Yes.
I know that there are in fact some interesting pivots in your journey in terms of why you went out to New York. But the other pivot point that stands out to me is here you are, you came back to Rochester, and your kind of the company's big break has arrived. And your wife is going to give birth any day now.
Yes.
And you're a tenured professor. You could relax,
Yep.
probably do anything you want, but you choose to start a company. And it seems that there's something kind of about your outlook, your entrepreneurial outlook, that made you make a different decision. Tell us a little bit about, first of all, that situation, but also what is it that's driven you to take risks all along to kind of put yourself in the right places at the right time?
Sure. Yeah, the exact story was I was here. I'm tenured professor at RIT. Things are going very well there. Great job. However, people were contacting me to do this work, and NBC showed up through another company, IMG. They're the company behind Tiger Woods and Jeff Gordon, contracts, marketing, all that stuff. They asked, somehow they found me, I don't know how, but they found me and said, Jason, we want to make a video player for NBC. And it was a large job. It was the biggest freelance job I ever saw, and it was much bigger than my freelance projects. It was, financially, could have impacted our life for the better. And 8 years later, it certainly did. So I asked my wife, I said, Jen, if I say yes to this job, I'm not going to be around a lot. We're about to have a kid, and I'm going to be working RIT and this. So it was 80, 90-hour work weeks. I would get home from RIT and go right back to work till 5 in the morning. drinking a lot of coffee, lots of coffee in those days. So she said, yes, let's do this. And I said, sure, let's do it. As a risk taker, let's do it. When I think about myself, I think there's new souls and old souls. I'm a new soul. All this is new to me. So for me, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Not thinking about any repercussions or what it really meant for my life as far as, how it was going to affect me from a time standpoint, stress standpoint. However, it worked out. And there's a few other pivotal points too where, opportunity arises, and I think first as an entrepreneur or even as a person, seeing those opportunities, you need to be able to recognize them. And I think a lot of people are good at recognizing the opportunities. Say, hey, I got that great idea for an app, or what if I did that? I'm one of those people where once that comes into play, it's like, I got to execute on it. So I think that's the big difference. I follow through, I do it, and I think that's what makes an entrepreneur. Sometimes not being afraid of the risk, or maybe just being naive of the risk. That's a blessing in my business adventures. And another great opportunity was my business partner Keith. And this is just another story of things working out. I'd started the company, we had made our first game for Nickelodeon. They liked us, but we weren't really a gaming company at that point. We're like a website, engaging, immersive content company. We would make things for movies, rich data applications for NBC's video player. We did a lot of different things. And then we made that first game, and then Keith, who was actually from my first graduating class at RIT, called me up after he had been working for a company in Seattle that made games for Nickelodeon. And he just called me and said, Jason, thinking about going to RIT to get a teaching degree. I was like, Keith, I have a gaming company that makes games for Nickelodeon. Why don't you come work for me? He's like, all right, I'm there. And, if we fast forward again, now Keith is my business partner and a good friend and very responsible for the success of this company. And there's so many stories like that where opportunity arose, I was able to see it, we executed on it, and it's worked out for us. Sometimes we joke around where we just say, if we talk about it, it's going to happen. And sometimes that's scary. It's like we talk about new clients and all of a sudden they show up. I feel very fortunate that we've had this kind of life that's worked out.
So in addition to Keith, who I'm sure has done a great amount of work to build this company, I know that a large portion of your talent pool came from RIT, and actually I loved hearing the fact that about 80% of those came out of the co-op program. Yes. So you really got to do something good for RIT, do something good for yourselves. What are some of the other unique elements and also challenges of growing a company specifically in Rochester?
Sure. Yeah, Alice, I just want to touch on the RIT thing, and Andy Phelps is here. He's from Magic Studios at RIT, formerly running the game department over there too. They're such a huge supporter of what we do, and all the gaming companies in Rochester, they just wouldn't be here if RIT wasn't here, and if they weren't making these students that we can put right to work. So it's so important for what we're doing in this community, and the relationships that we have with RIT and the other gaming studios are really, really important. So just want to make sure I call them out. Some of the challenges for having this type of company in Rochester, I think one of the biggest ones is we have these great resources coming out, and they're young, talented people coming into Workinman as RIT graduates. However, we're competing with cities like New York City or San Francisco, where there's this thriving community and culture and things for them to do, and no winter, or less winter. So, we do, I think that's one of our biggest concerns is keeping people here. keeping young talent in Rochester. And I'm not sure what the solution is to that, but it's certainly something on our radar, Alex. Like, how do we keep people here and reduce flight risk? It's a serious concern.
Sure.
Yeah.
What have been some of the successful things you've done to actually take this team, grow it, make it cohesive, make them a group that can make these very important clients who obviously are used to the best possible service,
Sure.
make sure that they make them happy?
That's a good question, and I think one of the things that Keith and I do is we self-assess. We self-assess the company, we self-assess ourselves, and one of the things that we've realized is our customer service is just the best out there. We've just created a company that our clients feel like we're their friends, and not only that, they trust us. Sometimes we joke around where they think that we're actually employees, and there's a double-edged sword there. I mean, they ask a lot, but we don't mind delivering. We've built an incredible relationship with our clients, and I think that's one of the most successful things that we've done. I cannot stress enough customer service. If we said all of you were individual gaming companies and we're all at the same level of quality and abilities, what's going to separate you from the pack? And we think customer service is one of those things that really separates us. And that comes down, Keith and I, that comes from us. Top down, everybody understands what the message is to the client because we are the essence of that. And I think people understand that we're all about the client, and they treat the client the same way we would.
One of the other unique things I thought about and I learned more about your company is that oftentimes when companies are trying to, or have customers that are like Disney and others, and I see this all the time in the healthcare technology field.
Sure.
Everyone feels the need to go out, get the fanciest offices, get really fancy chairs, do all sorts of things to look the part.
Sure.
And that's actually, I know, kind of counter to the culture that you've developed. Can you talk a little bit more about the role of frugality?
Sure. We're probably too frugal at this point, now that we're a real company, but it's a legacy that we have, which maybe will change soon, Keith. We talk about the success of our company, and we deal with other entrepreneurs as well. And one of the things I've realized is some people will start a new business, and the first thing they do is go out and buy a bunch of Herman Miller chairs, $1,200 a piece. Sitting on a $1,200 chair doesn't make your work any better. It doesn't make your customer service any better. It just means you spend a lot of money on something fancy. But if that doesn't show up in your work or affect your product or your service, then are you spending your money wisely? We are so frugal. We have no debt, and we're this 36 person company, and it's because we manage the money very tightly. We don't do anything too crazy, but what's going to give us the most return, the most benefit on our money for spending it? I was joking with Alex and maybe Keith a little bit. The worst business decision I've made was, I hope my interior designer isn't going to watch this, but spending money on custom curtains, to make the office look nice. I was like, I could have probably got those at Target, but I didn't, and I spent a lot of money, and I'm like, did that really help our bottom line or our service? And retrospect, probably not. So scar tissue, I'm going to learn from it. We're not going to get any more custom curtains.
Now, perhaps the frugality will be useful because I know that looking forward, one of the things that your company is thinking about doing and trying to do is moving from working for these companies and providing them with what they're looking to do, with actually taking some of the ideas that your team has generated over time and creating your own games.
Sure.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because that seems like a major change. How do you see that envisioning, or how do you envision that working out? And what challenges do you expect to see?
Yep. So right now the company is a service-based company. That means Nickelodeon comes to us, Disney comes to us, they have an idea, they have a project, and they ask us to create a game for them. We don't own the properties, we don't own the games. You know, if you're familiar with Candy Crush or any other IP, maybe you guys are playing Jetpack Joyride, you know, whatever it is. Those companies own those games and they're creating a lot of revenue off of them. So they make it once and then everybody buys their extra life. You know, they're generating, some of them, $1 million a day, a lot of revenue. We are just, I call it, we're flipping the burger. So we're flipping a new game every week or every month to get that service money back. So that's our DNA, that's who we are. As Workinman, that's who we are as a company. And we're finally at this point where we have this incredible service-based company. And you know, we love doing that. We love working for these youth brands. However, we would like to create a revenue model that is reoccurring revenue, where we code a game and it's a little less work to maintain it and create more revenue. So we have an IP department, Keith? All right, so we have 2 guys working on IP. So we do have our own game that we've created called Death State. And it's a game that's going to be released on Steam and possibly Sony Vita and also possibly Amazon TV Fire TV. So, you know, this is where we're looking to go with the company. However, the challenge is we are this service-based company, and you know, this goes back to like seeing opportunity, being able to recognize opportunity, but then executing on it. This is the one thing, how do we execute on it when we're already this service-based company? How do we change our DNA to be an IP-based company? Well, frugality, Alex, to go back to that, is, well, you need money. If you're going to make your own projects and products, you need to have money to float either resources, or we have to say no to service-based work to put resources on it. So it's really about time and money. We have ideas, we have talent, we have people, but now how do we actually execute on it? So this is where we're at with the company, strategically changing our DNA to an IP-based company instead of just a service-based. If I had it my way, we'd have, you know, 2 different departments, just everybody doing IP, another department doing service-based, and they support each other. What's nice is the service-based actually supports some IP development, and if we are frugal enough with that income, we can put it towards funding our own IP.
What are some of the key takeaways, things you've learned as an entrepreneur so far that you think that aspiring entrepreneurs, no matter what industry they're in, could benefit from knowing?
Sure. I'm going to go back to frugality. You know, depending on your situation, of course, but even if you're seated and you got $5 million, cautionary tale, we've worked with people who were funded with $5 million. They blew through it, and all they had at the end was a website that said, come back later, under construction. So, you know, there is a lot to be said about managing your finances and having the right people in place to spend your money wisely. One of our biggest challenges that we ran into, we were a Flash-based gaming company. If you guys are familiar with Flash, it's a plugin in the browser. And a guy named Steve Jobs did not allow that on the iPad or these devices. But 99% of our work was Flash work that would go in a browser. It would live on the Nick.com website, and kids would go up there and play it. Nickelodeon would sell ad revenue on it, and you know, they would use the ad revenue to pay us. However, our clients disappeared. You know, it went silent for three months, maybe even longer, where we didn't get any new work. And this is when we were probably about 20 people, maybe, you know, plus or minus a few. And we didn't know what to do. We were totally shocked that our partners, you know, we saw Nickelodeon as our partner. We were so close with them, for them not to show up or have any new work for us. maybe that's where all my hair went. But it was a shocker. And the takeaway from that was, let's not get caught not knowing what the next technology is or the big shift. Since I've been doing this in the early 1990s, Director was a technology that I started using, then Flash showed up, and my art director at Nickelodeon came in and said, Jason, you better learn this if you want to be around. And I was like, oh man, I want to be around. So I owe it to that guy to get me into Flash because it set up my whole career. But now Flash had that 10, 12-year cycle of being the primary content, and it went away almost instantly. Now there's a lot of people who didn't shift with that technology. Keith and I know people who didn't survive, whether they were freelancers or other companies, they're just not around anymore. So the big takeaway is, if you're in technology or I guess any job that requires big shifts, pay attention to that technology. I think R&D is something we should be really good at, and we try to be good at. We're always looking what's next, and we want to be prepared for that. It could mean your business fails if you're not looking forward. And then also, for us, we luckily had some angels at some of our companies that kind of guided us, saying, where is technology going? Where's my company going with this? And if you have those kind of champions or angels with people that you know who are in the industry who could give you insight, that certainly helped us out quite a bit. It's nice to be prepared for that, especially at this level of having so many people.
Thank you. Well, so we have time for a few questions. There was one that was actually asked. I was asked to ask you, and then whoever wants to ask questions after that, just raise your hands, and you'll have a chance.
Sure.
The one question that somebody wanted me to ask you. So you make games. Your company makes games for the youth market. How do you? And now you're a father. How do you feel, and what do you think about kids today playing so many video games?
Sure. Well, again, I have two thoughts on this. As a dad, I'm probably one of the most restrictive parents with the iPad and the iPhone. It's a psychology experiment, right? You want these kids to play, you want them to have this content. We're measured success by how much revenue it creates, how much time these are the stats we get from Nickelodeon. How long does a kid play the game? How many times do they come back? When do they leave and why? We want to know this stuff, so we can make better games to keep them longer. Entertainment, right? So it's all about moderation, and I think that's how I approach this. You can play games. Better play my games if you're my kid. But, moderation of playing this content. And as content consumers, I think being aware of what is happening, release those dopamine levels, keep clicking, keep playing, keep buying. If you're aware of it, I think it's easier to moderate it. But, yeah, have fun with games. They're fun.
And I have little kids, and they've learned a lot from Nick Jr. games and certainly Sesame Street.
I was going to say there is an educational component
to it. So I saw that there were some hands up before, and I'm linked here, so you'll meet them.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
A couple of comments. Your observation about keeping ahead of technology is incredibly important. I remember the days when DEC and Data General ran the computer business, and they were all gone. And a company called Eastman Kodak, I think it's still an ally to the point where they didn't see things coming. Real question is, by instance, I'm a visiting scholar at RIT in the chemistry department.
Oh, great.
And until I sat here an hour ago, I had no idea you existed. And I know that RIT is changing their R&D to change their image, and yet I've never heard your name and never heard your company, and your success story. Why do you suppose that I'm sitting in Gosnell, having no idea what you're doing probably 20 feet away?
Well, I got to be careful here. but anybody who works at RIT knows and this isn't going to be a bad or poo-pooed on, there's silos there. I've been there 14 years, this would have been my 15th year, and I have no idea what you're doing. I think what happens is professors get so into what they're doing. You're trying to teach at a very high level, you're trying to do service, you're trying to, you're research. How do you get time to go see what the guy in new media is doing? It's not a reality. I think RIT is doing great things with the Innovation Center and Magic, trying to create these environments where you're getting a lot of different disciplines together. And I've actually been on some of the panels to help out with that, where you take someone from chemistry and a business student and a new media designer and a mechanical engineer, and you put them in the room and see what happens. And it's magical. So I hope more of that happens because I've seen the results of it.
So we have time for one more question, which I know is a lot of pressure. Wow, so much pressure that nobody wants to raise their hand. Oh, now we have two suddenly.
Oh,
okay.
hey, great.
Okay, I'll plug you this for a second. Bring your question. So you guys are at the point where you're starting to really consider first-party content, right? Which is kind of a scary proposition for any studio.
Yep.
And the transition point between service and your own IP. You talk a lot about frugality. What's your process for making decisions about when something hits the line of frugality versus when you're willing to deeply invest in yourself?
Sure.
Because that's what first-party IP takes.
Yep.
Right. So how do you walk that line?
Yep. Thanks. Well, Andy, to be honest, with us, we've had so many great ideas for IP. And what it comes down to is, do you take on an investor? For us internally, it's like we know we've got a great idea, but do you take that risk? Well, all right, we're a unique situation, right? We have this service base. How much do we risk this great business we have to risk it on an IP venture, right? I got a credit line. I could fund a very nice IP project, but do I? And it's so risky now because the market is so saturated. Even with our great game, is it gonna be $1 million down or downloaded 1 million times? Not without a huge marketing budget and a huge marketing plan to go with it. We don't have the marketing savvy right now. We are game developers. And I think for us, where we're going with our IP is we're being very cautious about it. And we're going with a niche market. We got a niche game for a niche market on Steam. It's like, we're not gonna fight through all the crap of the iOS, the App Store, or Google Play. Well, Google Play might still be there. But Steam is our place. Sony Vita, that market, they release, 5 games a month or something? It's so small. I think we have more likelihood of low cost of development, low cost of advertising, and not big return, but return that looks appealing to us. We're not going for the next Candy Crush. I don't think that's who we are, and that goes back to being authentic. So for us, we've had ideas where it's like, could we get $1 million and make this game? It's like, I don't know if I have the stomach for that much risk, especially because we already have this very successful company. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's some of the thoughts that we've had talking about this.
Well, thank you very much, Jason and Arena. I think there are a lot of great things I think we all learned from your story, and I know that Jason will be sticking around because this is not why you're sticking around, but there is free food and there are some drinks and other things and a lot of great people. And thank you all very much for being here.